It's great to have you joining with us today as we conclude our journey through the book of Mark. And this is a journey that we begun back in May this year. And at that time when we started this, we had no idea what 2020 would end up looking like. And it's been a year that's looked like none other for us, hasn't it? Where there's been changes and restrictions, and what we thought the year would look like back then is completely different to the journey that we've had throughout the year. When I think back over the year, there's been a couple of moments that I've been really grateful for, where I can see the joy in those moments, but that has not been the characteristics of the year for me. The year, as I look at it, it's been filled with more feelings like uncertainty. It's been filled with feelings of frustrations or struggles over this year, and I know that for many of you it's been exactly the same. And for us as a pastoral team, we've all gone through that with you. We've all struggled over this time. And we've had moments where it's been frustrating and hard and where it's just worn us down. But as we've gone on this journey through 2020, one of the things that has sustained me over this time has been the question of who is Jesus as we've looked through the book of Mark. And this question for me has really been a bit of a two-edged sword. Firstly, as I've asked this question and I've looked deeper at what Mark's been saying, as I've read through the book of Mark and gone, well, who is Jesus? Who is this saying Jesus is? This has really encouraged me as I've sought to know Jesus a lot deeper. And it's revealed things like seeing how Jesus is compassionately generous towards people in need. How he'll go out of his way to impact people's lives when they needed him most. And how he would notice people and not just perform a miracle in their lives, but go deeper in transforming them. Transform them on a deep level with what's really going on at the heart of them. And even when Peter declared that Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus slowed down to help clarify and help them see a little bit more of what it meant for him to be the Messiah. Not just a word, but what the image of who the Messiah really was. And this has encouraged me because these lessons of looking at Jesus deeper, asking this question of who is Jesus, is really highlighted these characteristics of Jesus. And knowing that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever has really given me strength over this time, as I know that Jesus is consistent in the season that we face today. And the second thing that it's really helped me with this two-edged sword is to ask, who is Jesus in the midst of this season that we're in the middle of 2020? And these times that are hard and difficult, not just to look at what's going on around me, but to go, I know that Jesus is consistent. So at this moment, who is Jesus? And help me lift my eyes from what's going on around me and focus back on Jesus. Because if Jesus is alive, and if he's moving in our world today, if he is who Mark says he is, if he is consistent, then it gives me hope to be able to look into his character and look into his mission and what he's doing in our world. And then that compels me to be a part of what Jesus is doing here, instead of just looking at what I don't have. And one of the things that I've missed over this time as we've gathered together, as we haven't been able to gather together as a community, is hearing the stories come from you guys about what God's sharing in your life. And what we want to do today as we finish our journey through the book of Mark is I want to encourage you guys to share now with the people that you gather with. And I'd really like to encourage you to share briefly in the chat function, whether it's in Church Online or on YouTube, just a quick story about how God's been speaking to you over this year. It might be a verse that's really stuck out to you, or it's a lesson that God's been revealing, or an idea or a challenge that he's worked in your life. But it's been one of the things that we've missed, is being able to see these stories and hear these stories and be encouraged by them. So I'd love you guys to share that now and share that together as a community, as we can hear the stories of what God's been doing in your life over this year. Because as we've been journeying through Mark, this question of who is Jesus has been the center. It's been the theme that's run through the whole book. And when we reach chapter 16, Mark really starts to drive this home by changing the question. So it goes from who is Jesus to who is Jesus for you? And when I think about this question for myself, the story goes back to 2003. In 2003, I was 14 years old, and it was the time that I first stepped foot in a Christian church. And I remember when I stepped in there were two clear observations that I had. After the first service I went to, I was chatting with my mum afterwards, and she said, "What do you think?" And I said, when these guys talk about the Bible, they talk about it like they've read it and like they actually believe what it says. And the second thing was, as I looked at the people who were in this community, I saw that there was something different about them. There was a peace about them and a joy about them and a confidence about them that I hadn't experienced in my own life. So these two observations made me go, well, maybe there's something more to this. So I started to look into who Jesus was. And as I journeyed in that and over the next few weeks and months, I began to discover that this character of Jesus was not like anything I've read in a fiction book before. And this character of Jesus, there was something real about it. It impacted my life. It changed who I was, and the words that he spoke started to have meaning in what I was going through and started to speak to me. And 3 months later, after I was going through this journey and I started thinking about this, I started to discover that I was actually becoming a follower of Jesus. That what he was saying had an impact on my life that changed the way I was living. And in the 16 years since then, this journey into this question of who is Jesus has grown, it's changed. Sometimes it's got deeper and I focus on it more. Other times it's sort of taken a bit of a backward step and it started to drift away, and then God's had to reignite that flame again. But this question about who is Jesus has become so pivotal for me, and it still is today as I begin to look at my life again and go, well, in this year, in this season, who is Jesus? I want to ask that question to you. Today, as we finish this journey together, who is Jesus for you? Who do you see Jesus as? As we look back over Mark and we can glean through some of the things that Mark says, when he starts to talk about who Jesus is, he says that firstly, that he's a man of action. When so many times in Mark, Jesus is going immediately from here to there, and he's constantly on the go. He's constantly moving and being a part of what God is doing. He's one who has authority over the dominion of evil. When there is evil and brokenness and fallenness in our world, Jesus moves and has dominion over that, and he transforms and changes it. And what he says and what he does shows that he's got power over these places of darkness. Jesus is someone that is compassionate to the plight of the suffering people. So people who are hurting, he's compassionate towards them, moves him in his heart. And he notices them and he draws close to them and he interacts with their lives. And as he does that, he works miracles in their world. He's a miracle worker. And he's powerful enough to do something about this suffering and injustice that is happening in this world. And this power that's inside of Jesus goes beyond just overcoming the brokenness in our world. He can even control nature. And it makes us go, who is Jesus? It's part of the image that Mark is painting. And he goes on to show that Jesus is someone who teaches with authority beyond what any of the religious leaders could teach at the time. He knew it to another depth, another intimate level. He is someone who reaches beyond the cultural boundaries and the social status so he could reach people who are isolated, people who are cut off, who are excluded from community. Jesus moves and interacts with them on this deeper level. And as he does this, it's constantly being misunderstood by those who are around him. It's being constantly misunderstood by his followers because as Jesus shows who God is, it's challenging their perception of who God is. They don't comprehend God in the way that God really is. They only comprehend him through the structure that they can see him. Because the real message that Mark's trying to drive is that Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is God himself who has come and walked on this earth and revealed who God is to us. And that's where we pick up the story today. As we look at Mark chapter 16, the end of the journey through Mark. And where this passage begins is coming off the back of the death of Jesus. So Jesus had been moving and heading towards Jerusalem, and this imagery of him being the Messiah, the chosen one, the one who's going to free his people, was being driven in the second half of the book. And this builds up to the point that he ends up being arrested. And then he gets hung on a cross for hours, and then he dies. And in his final breath, one of the executioners, one of the Roman soldiers, looks up and says, "Surely this man was the Son of God." And after that moment, his body is taken down from the cross and laid in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And this happens on Friday night. And then we pick up the story in Mark 16 verse 1 on the Sunday morning. And it reads, "When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might go and anoint Jesus." And what's interesting with this is this image of Sabbath. See, Sabbath is this custom in Jewish culture where people are meant to stop and draw into God's presence. They're meant to reflect on who God is and take a break from the busyness of life and remove themselves from all that to spend time in devotion and worship towards God. But this Sabbath, the one on this day, is a Sabbath like no other. See, in this Sabbath, the Messiah has been killed. The Son of God is dead. God himself is dead. This is a Sabbath that, as people draw to worship God and reflect on God, for the women there and for the followers of Jesus, this is a time filled with hopelessness. What hope remains when the God that you're serving is dead? He's been overcome by evil. Evil's triumphed and he's laying dead in a tomb. This Sabbath is a time filled with brokenness and doubt. And it causes us to ask the question in that moment of going, who is Jesus? Because Mark up to this point has been building this image that he's the Son of God, he's the Messiah. But in this verse, all hopelessness is all that remains. All hope is gone. And I love this verse here. I love the fact that it talks about this, because on this Saturday of hopelessness and brokenness, it's something that I can relate to. It's this time when I feel like I can question, in those moments where I've got all this doubt and I question whether God is even alive. Can God see this? See what I'm going through? Is God powerful enough to do something about this? And that's the same posture that these people are taking, these followers of Jesus are taking right here. So what we go on to see is as the women approached the tomb on the Sunday morning, they got up with spices to anoint the body. These spices, they're meant to anoint a dead body, so as it decomposes over the following 2 years, it's got fragrance and aroma that helps with that process. And then after 2 years, they collect the bones. They're going towards a tomb that morning, not to go and see the risen Messiah. No, they're going there accepting that Jesus is dead. All hope is gone. And the disciples, they don't even rock up. Those who are closest to Jesus, they don't even turn up to the tomb on this morning. It's showing the depth of this hopelessness that they feel. Even though Jesus had shared 3 times that he was going to die and be raised again on the 3rd day, after he did die, they don't recall this. They don't have faith in this. They don't believe this. And they're scattered and they're divided and their life is filled with hopelessness. And as I look at this year and moments in my life, there's been times where I have felt like God isn't there, that God doesn't care, that God is removed. And it looks like this Saturday, where I'm questioning, going, who is Jesus? Because all I can see is the hopelessness of the situation that I'm in. And as they approach the tomb this morning, they're filled with this hopelessness. But when they get there, they see a stone is rolled away. And inside was sitting a young man who was an angel. And he said to them, he goes to them as they approach, he goes, sitting there, and he says, do not be alarmed, for you seek Jesus of Nazareth, the one who was crucified. You seek Jesus, but he is not here. There's only his grave clothes, because he is risen. They came that morning to anoint the body, but that body is no longer there, because Jesus isn't the God of the Saturday. He's the risen Messiah of the Sunday. Makes us go, who is Jesus? As we look at these seasons where we struggle, as we look at these times of doubt, is Jesus the God of the Saturday? Or is he God of the Sunday, the resurrected Messiah? And as the angel speaks to these women, all their grief, all their despair is being transformed into a renewed hope, into this purpose they can now see. And he tells them, go, share with the disciples, share with Peter that Jesus is alive. And this is incredible because these are the ones who walked with Jesus, but they've abandoned him. They don't even rock up. They scattered when he's arrested. Peter, as Jesus was on trial in his hour of greatest need, Peter was also on trial. Jesus being questioned by the authorities and the religious leaders and the powers of the day. Peter's being questioned by those people who are insignificant. And Jesus stands strong and Peter crumbles. He denies Jesus and he fails. And in this moment, when we see Jesus to be, he goes, the angel says, go and tell him that he's risen. He's saying for Peter, there is hope. Where he felt like he was stuck in the Saturday, in the hopelessness and the despair. Is God even here? My God is dead. And he's going, no, he is alive. And you're not defined by your failures. No, you are defined by new life. Come back to Jesus. Be transformed. Be renewed. And for the disciples, it's calling them into a greater purpose as the women are told to go and share. And this renews a hope. It transforms the way that they see the world. And he says to them to step out in faith because Jesus has gone ahead of you to Galilee. He's ahead of you now. And that's going to take faith to move from this place where they feel like they're stuck. To move in faith to where Jesus is already standing. Where Jesus is already leading in front of them. So it forms this question for us going, well, who is Jesus? And for us, as we're in this moment now, as life goes back to normal and there's busyness and we're able to build community again, for us it raises the question of who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Is he going to be the one of the Saturday? God of the Saturday, the one filled with despair and death? Or is he going to be transformed with newness of life, renewed life, one that has hope into these broken seasons? And it's going to take faith for us to respond. And this is where Mark leaves us with this tension of who do you see Jesus as? Is it everything that he said and revealed up to this point leading to a tomb or to new life? And it forms the key question that Mark wants to leave us with. The question is, who is Jesus for you? Who do you see Jesus to be today? You see, at the bookends of Mark, it starts in chapter 1 with the baptism of Jesus, where he goes, God says to Jesus, "This is my son with whom I'm well pleased." And it finishes in Mark 15 with the declaration of this soldier saying, surely he was the Son of God. And he wasn't just the Son of God then, he is still today. He is alive. And if Jesus is the Son of God, then it has the question of how are we going to respond? For if he is the Son of God, if all this stuff that he says is true, then it demands a response from us. It demands us to live our lives in a way that shows Jesus to be the Son of God, to be the King of Kings. So who do you say Jesus is? Who is Jesus to you? Will you agree with Mark in saying that Jesus is the Son of God? Jesus is the one who has dominion over all evil and brokenness and all the twistedness of this world. Is Jesus someone that is compassionate to the plight of the suffering people? Is Jesus a miracle worker who is able to work in and through your lives to cause miracles and to transform those who are suffering and hurting and afflicted by the injustices of this world? Is that who Jesus is? Is Jesus one who has the authority to teach and inform you how to live your lives more than anything else in our lives? Is Jesus someone who's prepared to reach beyond the cultural and social boundaries to make an impact for change? Because if Jesus is these things, then how will you respond? You can't acknowledge it in one sense and then not have your life reflect that. How will you live in response to that and respond? The way you respond testifies to who Jesus really is to you. And this is what our world is needing right now. So we're in this place of hopelessness, of brokenness, as we look at the season that's gone before us and we're coming into freedom again. What the world is needing Jesus at the heart. And this question of who is Jesus today resonates there. What the world is needing is Jesus' church, God's church, to step out and follow to where he's already leading into this world. What is he doing? Because he's the same yesterday, today and forever. And that demands us to respond and live lives that reflect that to our world. Because the tomb is empty and Jesus is alive. And there is a hurting and broken world that he's calling us as we come back together, as we do community together, not just to come and sit in pews again. No, but to come and be filled with his Spirit, to be a part of his mission, to step out into this world, to not just go into the busyness of life again, but to come and be his hands and his feet, to show that he's living, he's alive, and that we live in the same way that he did, and see the world transformed by this resurrected Jesus, by this resurrected Messiah. Because if Jesus is the Son of God, as Mark says, if he's the Son of God as I believe, as our church declares, then that causes us to respond in a way where we seek to live out and reveal that to the world around us, that the tomb is empty, that hope is alive, that Jesus has gone before us with a mission and an invitation for us to follow. And that starts with this question of who is Jesus to you? And how will your life reflect that? How will you live in response to that? Because if he is the Son of God, if he is who Mark says he is, then that will permeate every aspect of our lives. And our lives should reflect that and reflect hope every day. So the challenge is before us as we finish Mark to go back to the beginning. Go back to the beginning of the book and ask again, who is Jesus? And ask that question every day. Because if he is who Mark says he is, if he is who we know him to be, then our lives need to reflect that. And our world is hungry for that and longing for that. And the challenge is there. The Spirit is leading. But the question remains, who is Jesus to you? Let's pray. Father, I want to thank you for the work that you've done through Jesus. And I thank you for your word that challenges us and guides us, and your Spirit that illuminates these questions in our lives. And I pray for each of us that we would wrestle through this question of who is Jesus really? Who is he to us? And how are we going to live in response to that? I pray for our world that's going through all this transition and change. I pray that they will be open to what your Spirit is doing and leading, and that us as a church can respond and be your hands and feet, that we would take the lessons that you've shown through this book of Mark, these questions that you've raised, and this encouragement to say, Jesus isn't the God of Saturday that's laying in a tomb, that he's the risen Messiah. He's alive and he's going before us. I pray that we'll be able to live lives in response to that. Father, I pray for each of us that we would be able to follow you with confidence and boldness, and that you would lead and guide us, and that hope will be renewed within us and through us to our world, and many people will come to know who you really are. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.